This is your math gal, Julie Harland. Please visit my website at yourmathgal.com, where all of my videos are organized by topic. This is part 13 of graphing cosine functions, and on this video we're going to graph y equals 1/2 cosine of x over 3 minus 3. Alright, so we're stepping it up a little bit here. We see we're going to have a period change because of this x over 3. And our amplitude is going to be different because of this 1/2 out in front. And I also have a minus 3 at the end, so we're going to have a vertical shift. So there's a lot more going on this one. Now the domain always remains the same, remember? The domain is all real numbers. And we'll leave off the range for now. What about the amplitude? The amplitude is the absolute value of the coefficient of the cosine, so that'll be absolute value of 1/2 or 1/2. And what about the vertical shift? We've got minus 3 at the end, so it's going to go down 3 units. All right, so let's see. Is there a phase shift? There isn't, because there's no plus inside the parentheses. It's just x over 3. So there is no phase shift, so we don't need to write that down. But how are we going to get the period? So remember, x over 3 is the same thing as 1/3 of x. So b is equal to 1/3. And how do we always get the period? We take the period of cosine, which is 2 pi, and we divide by b. So that's 2 pi times 3, or 6 pi. So we know we're going to get a full period of 6 pi units, and keep in mind, once we get our x coordinates, for our key x coordinates, we need to add 1/4 of the period. So just keep in mind, what is 1/4 of the period? Well, 1/4 of 6 pi is 3 pi over 2. So we're going to add, just keep this in mind, we're going to add 3 pi over 2 from our first x coordinate. And our first x coordinates always start with 0 unless there's a phase shift. So we're going to start with 0. So I think we're ready to go here. Okay, over here in the upper right corner is our usual x coordinates and y coordinates for y equals cosine of x. And so we're going to start with 0 because there is no phase shift. So we'll start with 0. But we have a period of 6 pi. So remember, we add 1/4 of the period to get the next one. So we're going to add 3 pi over 2. And then we have to add 3 pi over 2 again. Well, that's going to be 6 pi over 2. Now, I know that you can write 3 pi. I'm just going to keep it with the same denominator, but that's the same. It's going to be easier for this next one because I'm adding 3 pi over 2 again. That'll give me 9 pi over 2. And then 3 pi over 2 again will give you 12 pi over 2. And yes, that is the same thing as 6 pi. By the way, I could have done the same thing here. I could have written this as 2 pi over 2 and this one as, 4 pi over 2, right? If I want to have them all with the same denominator. I'm going to get rid of it for now, though. Okay. So how am I going to get my y coordinates? Well, y is going to be 1/2 times whatever the cosine is, right? But minus 3. So I'm going to have 1/2 times the usual suspects over here, which are 1, 0, -1, 0, and I see I put accidentally a -1 over here. It's supposed to be a 1 as well. 1. And then I got to subtract 3, right? Remember, I'm doing my order of operations here. This gives me 1/2 times 1. Okay, so that gives me 1/2 minus 3. That's -2.5, or -5, however you want to write it. This is 0 minus 3. It's a negative 3. So you have to be good at your fractions. 1/2 times negative 1 is negative 1/2 minus 3. That's negative 3.5. Here we are at 0 minus 3, or negative 3 again. And we've got 1/2 minus 3 at negative 2.5. So do you notice what's going on with the range? The very smallest number and the very largest number? It goes between negative 3.5 and negative 2.5. That's a total of 1 unit. That's it. And that's because the amplitude's only 1/2. So that's why there's only one total unit from the bottom to the top. That's always going to be true, by the way. Whatever the amplitude is, twice as big as that is the difference between the smallest and largest number. So these are going to be our coordinates on our x and our y axes. We've got the period, and we already figured out the domain before. That was the negative infinity to infinity. Now we could look at this, and what's the range? Negative 3.5. You always put the smaller number on the left, and if you want to write negative 7/2, that's fine. It goes between negative 3/2 to negative 1/2. The amplitude was 1/2, and then there was the vertical shift. I'm just going to put VS. It was down 3 units, or 3 units down, whatever. So now we're ready to graph using these ordered pairs, and then we'll be done. All right, so here are our ordered pairs, our period, amplitude, domain, range, vertical shift, and period. So on the x-axis, we're going from 0 to 6 pi, but notice, getting common denominator, I've got 2. I want to make a marking for every, let's see, at least 2 units here. So I've got to get all the way up to 12. So I'm going to start way over here on the left, and also for the, actually I'm going to start that up even a little bit higher because my y coordinates are all below. So I'm going to start this about something like that. So I'm going to do I've got to get 12 in here. Got to do it even smaller. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and that's really 6 pi, right? That's the period. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's going to be 3 pi. And what about on your y-axis? We've got 1, 2, 3, let's do 4, negative 4. Okay, so we can put little tiny markings here where the half marks are, etc. And there we go, we're ready. So we graph 0, negative 2.5, so right here. 3 pi over 2, negative 3. So 3 pi over 2 means you're going, each of these is pi over 2, right? The way I marked it, because this is pi right here. So 1, 2, 3 pi over 2 down at negative 3. Just right here. Oops, sorry. And then at 6 pi over 2, that's the same thing as 3 pi. I'm up here again at negative 2.5. It's hard without graph paper. And then at 9 pi, that's over here, we are up at negative 2.5 again. I'm sorry, 9 pi over 2 is negative. I'm getting lost here. Let me do this again. Let's see, we've got 0, negative 2.5, 3 pi over 2, negative 3. Oh, this is down at negative 3.5. There we go. Still going down. 9 pi over 3 is negative 3. And at 6 pi, we're up at negative 2.5, sort of where we started. So this is 1 period. It's a very shallow looking graph. And that's it. Might be nice if you had bigger space, but on this screen, I can't really draw these, but it'd be easier probably if I had a lot larger, units on the y-axis. This is your math gal, Julie Harland. Please visit my website at yourmathgal.com, where all of my videos are organized by topic.